on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Yeah, here we go again. Football show. Back with you after 9 o'clock. We have another season ahead. We've got a stacked football show this evening. So Graham Hunter will talk to us very shortly about Barcelona and their financial dexterity. We are joined before all that, though, by Jonathan Wilson, who is with us on the line, because the Premier League season is ready to crank into gear once again from Friday evening. Crystal Palace will get things underway against Arsenal at 8, and then on we go. It's just like any other weekend. We'll have Saturday, Liverpool away to Fulham, 12:30. Everton against Chelsea will be the 5:30 game. Sunday, we'll have Man United against Brighton. Man City will be away to West Ham. And Jonathan Wilson, once again, lives will be ruled by kickoff times.
Sorry, you've gone very faint there. I didn't hear what the final question was.
I said, once again, lives will be ruled by kickoff times.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, the respite of the summer is coming to an end, and it's been very noticeable this week how my workload has already gone through the roof.
So we'll be talking to you, by the way, in the next couple of weeks. I started Two Brothers about Jack and Bobby Charlton, your new book, and I have to say, first few pages did not make me want to work in a mine, I'll say that much. So I'm looking forward to chatting to you about the book. I mean, it's fascinating subjects, and when they're brothers, and the architecture around them should be a really, really great read. So I'm looking forward to that. So in the meantime, let's talk Premier League. We might start with Man City, the two thoroughbreds being Man City and Liverpool in this title race. There is, Man City are at an interesting precipice in many ways. They are looking to win a 5th title in 6 years, and that would really consign these years to era of total dominance, despite Liverpool's valiant efforts to keep pace.
Yeah, it would. I mean, it's only happened once before in English history that a team has won 5 out of 6, which was Manchester United around the turn of the millennium. And I think the irony of that is that it's not really what City are targeting. They really want to win the Champions League, and the league sort of seems to come along each season almost as a consolation now that they have this series of traumatic defeats in the Champions League, and I'm pretty sure that's the reason why they've taken what I think is a fairly substantial gamble with their forward line, changing how they play. And I think we did wonder whether Haaland would be a great fit for them. He's obviously a brilliant forward. They're obviously a brilliant team. Do the two go together? Well, what we saw on Saturday has only magnified those doubts. So perhaps this season there is an opportunity for others there.
I didn't see the game on Saturday, and I'll watch it back at some stage this week, but I've been really struck by the number of observers who did watch the game talking about the Haaland relationship with the rest of his team. To read from your piece, for instance, over the weekend on the Guardian website, Haaland seemed to be playing a different game to his teammates. Again and again he set off on surges behind the Liverpool back four, and again they went sideways, reluctant to risk possession. That sounds like a pretty frustrating afternoon.
Yeah, and I think in the immediate aftermath there was a lot of criticism of him, and he didn't look quite as fit as maybe you'd hope he would be, which I guess is maybe to do with his pre-season. He missed those two very good chances. The one in the last minute when the game was already over, when he hit the bar from 6-7 yards. I think that's probably less worrying than that seeming total disconnect with the midfield. And it was a very odd game to watch, because again and again you saw the ball come to De Bruyne particularly, who seems like such a switched-on, intelligent player, who's so central to how City play, and you think just a simple forward pass, and Haaland's in. He's found space between Matip and Van Dijk. He's got the run on them, and he did have a great physical battle with Van Dijk and didn't always come out on top in that. But he was making those runs, and the ball wasn't being played. Now, I guess to an extent that's why he's been bought. That there's a sense perhaps that in the very, very biggest games against the very, very best opposition, City maybe aren't quite as ruthless as they ought to be. I mean, they've been the top scorer for each of the last 5 seasons, so they don't have a problem scoring goals in the Premier League. But the fact they keep slipping up in these big European games, I presume the logic of bringing him in and offloading Sterling and Jesus is to try and just make them, I don't want to say predictable, but just to break up those patterns that I think in big games, very, very good opponents can sort of feel, yeah, we know what they're doing, that's okay. Whereas Haaland would give them that extra option. But as yet, that isn't gelling. And you know, I always sort of think that the very best teams, the most interesting teams, are those where there is a little bit of friction. The friction sort of makes them more creative. It gives them extra stimulus. And maybe everything's been a little bit too well lubricated for City. But in introducing that friction, it is obviously a gamble. And the evidence of Saturday is that you know, it's a pretty big gamble.
And Jonathan, did Haaland's body language speak of a man frustrated with the continual ignoring of his runs?
Well, I mean, it did, but I think that's natural. You know, I think, naturally, when you've made that run, you turn to whoever could have played that pass, and you sort of look at him and you shrug and you sort of say, "Come on, you could have released me there." But I think it is a difficult transition for City to make, because they're so used to trying to control games through possession, and you never saw that Guardiola line. Even, I mean, it was back in his Barcelona days, he said it, but I think it remains true that he thinks it takes 15 passes to set up the play as he wants it set up. Yeah, he's somebody who's instinctively cautious about very rapid counterattacks and transition and introducing an element of chaos to the game, which Klopp clearly is very happy to do. In fact, he tries to create the chaos, and I think it will take a change on their part. And the time when Guardiola has tried to do that before was bring Ibrahimovic to Barcelona in 2009. Ibrahimovic, a player that Haaland consciously has modelled himself on, who shares certain characteristics in terms of their size, their capacity to physically overpower opponents, and that didn't work out. And again, you know, it's pre-season. We're desperately looking for clues to what's going to happen. But there was that very strange thing on Twitter last week. I don't know if you saw it, of Haaland going into Marks and Spencer and saying, "What am I going to buy?" Then a few minutes later, there's a photograph of him buying some Percy pigs. Now, maybe that's just sort of, he's bought some sweets, so what? But it felt slightly pointed, as if he's sort of rebelling against the very controlling culture of City that monitors diet and body fat and everything else.
It did. Well, because he put in brackets at the end, "Don't tell anyone."
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the tone of it was very much, look at me being naughty, look at me rebelling. I mean, if that is the sum of his rebellion, who cares?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's. I think it's, that's one of those things that, in 3 months we'll either forgotten all about it, or we go back. Oh, look, the signs were there, and it's hard to tell it at this point.
I mean, it's hard to imagine in 2-3 months' time that De Bruyne and Haaland haven't struck up a fairly outrageous relationship. And I'd almost, if you were to say to me now, well, you can choose to guess that De Bruyne will set Haaland up for 10 goals, over or under, with first-time passes more than 15, 20 metres, I'd be inclined to say probably over, because De Bruyne will start to realise, I mean, anyone who's watched a compilation of Haaland goals, one of his many gifts, but certainly one of them, is an ability to make these incredible runs that actually just seem to make a midfielder's life very, very easy. He has this innate ability to pick the right line and the right angle and the right speed, and it's like, well, just give it to me and I'll stick it in the net. So it's really hard to imagine De Bruyne ignoring those runs for very long, unless the express wishes of his manager are to ignore those runs, in which case it's a very strange signing.
Yeah, I think all of that is true. The one thing I would slightly caveat that with is they won't play many teams who play as high against them as Liverpool do and leave that space for him to run into. And I think that was the bigger question I had about him. And that was why I thought, he's been signed for big games. But when they play against, who's a good example of this? A team who sits very, very deep against them. I mean, Manchester United, the way they were at the beginning of 2 seasons ago, when Solskjaer was sort of threatening to actually do something with that side before Ronaldo arrived and messed everything up. But a team that sits very, very deep against them, where there's no space for Holland to run into, you're then looking at him saying, well, what does he actually bring? Because for his size, he's not that good in the air. And anyway, City's game is absolutely not to just sling crosses in. And maybe, it's useful for them to have that option. I think the game away against PSG in the group stage of Champions League last season, City had loads of ball, sort of, 30 yards to 50 yards from a PSG goal. PSG sat really deep. And you just sort of thought, just sling it across. And then you sort of think, no, actually, slinging it across to Phil Foden maybe isn't the right thing to do. Or Raheem Sterling ended up playing centre forward. Whereas Haaland, you do have that option. But, he's not Niall Quinn. He's not somebody who you would back to beat the vast majority of centre-backs the majority of times. He's good in the air, but not brilliant in the air. And anyway, as I say, I think that's really not City's game. I think the value he adds is those runs, but I think those will only really occur either against teams who are chasing the game because they're behind, or because they're better sides and they do push out.
Yeah, I guess the other goal he's quite adept at is ball pulled back to him and finishes, and he'll score plenty of them, so that'll work. A last one on Haaland before.
That was the goal he scored against Bayern. For 12 minutes into his debut in the friendly, and I think it's significant. It was Grealish who set that up, because Grealish is the other one who. So last season, he's got that slightly anarchic presence to him, that anarchic personality, which can add something to City that they perhaps don't have. But he seemed to, that interview he gave on the final day of last season, I thought was incredibly revealing, despite Micah Richards' attempts to derail it. Talking about how he felt very anxious and was always second guessing himself. But if he and Holland can strike up a partnership, then I think that could be. It's both very dangerous for Guardiola because they are, slightly anarchic, but it's potentially very exciting for City.
Yeah, for sure. I can't believe I didn't rush to check if Jack Grealish retweeted the Percy Pig tweet of Haaland because that would be very worrying indeed for Guardiola.
Well, I think there are questions about Grealish's commitment to the absolutely rigorous diet regime of City. I'm not saying he's damaging himself, but I think he perhaps finds that difficult to stick to the absolute letter of the diet.
So the one last point I wanted to make about Haaland, or ask your thoughts on. Oh yes, to what extent will a Guardiola team require Haaland, do you think, to be involved in build-up play, to come short and take a touch and move it on and rotate and come back and be in general circulation and available for the ball at all times? Or can he almost stand there Niall Quinn-esque with his hands on his hips for a little while?
I'd be amazed if Guardiola let him do that. I think he will have to involve himself. He will have to pull wide. He will have to drop deep. I guess the one thing you'd say is, even by standing there, he manipulates the opposition, because you will be reluctant to push up against him. And that maybe just creates a little bit more space for City's midfield. So I think there is a semi-argument that by not moving, he creates problems for opponents and creates space. But I think... there will have to be some movement there. And that is an aspect of his game that he will have to improve and he will have to learn. And certainly, he'll be expected to press and close down passing lanes and close down opposition centre-backs when they have the ball.
Jonathan, from Liverpool's perspective, if this year is the chance for City to go 5-6 and really cement their dominance, for Liverpool, again, it has that defining feel, because instead of 5-6, 4-2 feels much more a reflection, I think, of this very competitive rivalry that we've enjoyed. So it is a really important season for Klopp and this Liverpool side, and how we remember them, even if that's a touch reductive just to go on the numbers. So Mane's gone, Nunez is in, and pre-season woes behind him, exaggerated I'm sure, and he celebrated accordingly. And there's just a real sense Liverpool are locked in, ready to go again, and it'll be City Liverpool all the way. Is there anything about Liverpool this summer to cause you great concern that they won't be thereabouts?
No, not great concern. I think the one question that sort of cropped up about them last season, I guess it's two related questions. So one was, I think, against the very best side. So if you look at their 6 games against the other 3 teams qualified for Champions League, so City, Chelsea and Tottenham, they drew all of those in the league. They played Chelsea twice in cup finals, drew both those and won on penalties. And then, if you're really looking to make the point, you could say the Real Madrid, the Champions League final. Yeah, they perhaps, against the very best sides, lack a little bit of guile. And I think that's why Klopp was so keen for Thiago to play in that final, despite fairly evidently not being fully fit. So that's the one slight issue, and you know, that has not been resolved. But I think that was magnified by Salah's loss of form in the latter half of the season, and I guess that could have been fatigue, because he played at the Cup of Nations, and obviously the fact that Egypt lost in the final of that, then he had the World Cup playoff when Egypt lost to Senegal, as they had done in the Cup of Nations final. You can see that there's a very clear external factor there that might be leading him to sort of just be slightly off colour and slightly fatigued. I also wonder whether the arrival of Diaz and Mane moving into the middle just slightly affected the dynamic of that front three. So he wasn't quite getting the service that he would get from peak Firmino or even from Jota. So I wonder whether, if he can strike up I don't want to say a better relationship, because that implies a criticism of Mane, which I don't really mean, but a relationship with Nunez which is more profitable for him. That could give Liverpool that little bit of guile that maybe they did just lack post Christmas last season. Yeah, no, I mean that's a very fair point, and the Spurs game at home in particular, where it really felt from quite a distance out in that game like they had run out of ideas and they weren't going to break Spurs down, definitely jumps to mind. And Madrid for sure at a certain point in that game, again, not a million, a fair distance from the full-time whistle, you got a real sense they weren't going to break Madrid down. That was definitely there. And yet the other side of that coin is, you think of the chances they did create against Madrid, for instance, and if they had just taken one of them, it's a different proposition. And we are talking about the finest of fine margins. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you'd say, those 6 league games, I think 4 of them were 2-2 and 2 of them 1-1. So they scored 10 goals in those 6 games, which, you'd think would be enough to win 2 or 3 of them. The set against that, the Madrid game, the 2 finals against Chelsea, 2-0 nils and a 1-0 defeat. But all of those games, they did create chances, they just didn't take them. And that, again, maybe is reflective of Salah being slightly off colour. And, of course, for most teams, the World Cup coming in November, December is likely to wear their players out more. Well, Liverpool, the fact that Salah's not going to be at the World Cup is beneficial to them. He can have a month off and he can come back fully refreshed. But the exact opposite of last season, when he was coming the second half of the season with a bit of fatigue. One point on the 2 managers. So Klopp signed a contract extension. Guardiola's future is less clear. Do they both look to you as full of energy and enthusiasm and ready for road? Because traditionally, I guess Guardiola has taken his sabbaticals from time to time, and Klopp, you feel, is an emotional type who needs to be fully invested in the project, and he looks to be at the moment. But your sense of kind of the energy levels and enthusiasm of Klopp and Guardiola this year? Yeah, I think it was definitely a danger towards. After that Champions League final, you did wonder about Klopp, but then, to be honest, even by that parade they had, he seemed to have his life back. That's understandable. The disappointment of having come so close to winning 4, and even, I think particularly the way that final day of the league season went, that they got much closer than, I have to say, I thought was ever likely. I just assumed City would cruise to victory over Villa and it wouldn't be an issue. But the fact it was almost within their grasp, I think to have that and then Champions League final within the space of a week, I think inevitably that sort of wears you down a bit. But the energy seemed to have come back by the parade, and last season was a brilliant season, and from the evidence of the Community Shield, he seemed fully energised, and why wouldn't he be? Because Liverpool played extremely well. Guardiola, I think he's much harder to read. There's always that slight tetchiness about him. I think, I don't know how much difference it makes that he brought in Juan Malillo, who had been his great mentor at the end of his playing career and the beginning of his managerial career. Had him there as assistant. He's now left, and they brought in Maresca, the former West Brom midfielder. I don't know if that's significant or not, but I guess if you've got that sort of elder statesman figure there who you absolutely trust, that's a protection that maybe isn't there anymore. So I don't know. He's somebody. I mean, both of them give so much of themselves. That you feel with both of them, they're both pretty close to breaking all the time. But Klopp's been at Liverpool for this is his 8th season, is it now?
Yeah. So he's never done a stint like this. I forgot about the parade. I mean, that was just the most insane thing. These parades are not meant to be joyous affairs, and he does have a magic touch. He did seem to turn the thing into this life-affirming, we're all in this together, we're a great team, this is to be enjoyed kind of moment, as opposed to slumped at the front of the bus. It's an amazing quality.
I think that's right. I mean, they won 2 domestic cups. They got to a Champions League final. They came within sort of 20 minutes and 2 goals of winning the league, and that's a great season. If you don't celebrate that, then you're not going to celebrate very much in life. So I think he got the. Cause I was sort of very sceptical about it. I'm a sort of a generally sort of parade skeptic. But I remember when Sunderland lost in the '92 Cup final, even though the parade literally went 200 yards from my door, I didn't bother to go and see it because I sort of thought, no, we've lost. But when I actually saw the Liverpool parade and you sort of saw the mood of the players, saw the mood of the fans, so I thought, yeah, this is a good and necessary thing. And in terms of pressing the reset button and sort of saying to people, don't be disappointed. This was a brilliant season. We came really, really close. It's the right thing to do. And I think he probably needed that, and I think the players probably needed that, and I think the fans needed it. And what that did was to clear the hangover immediately.
Yeah.
And it was a bit. I feel like I'm talking about Niall Quinn a lot now, but it was a bit similar to after Sunderland had lost on penalties in the playoff final in '98 after that 4-4 draw against Charlton. And Niall Quinn's post-match interview was immediately, forget this. We know we're the best team in this division. Let's win it next season. And that you sort of felt lifted the mood. And I think this was a similar process of kind of making sure that the defeat didn't become something that dragged the team down, the fans down in the longer term.
But Jordan Henderson at the time said it was one of the greatest days of his life. The parade. He's had a lot of good days. This is the genius of Klopp. You're now 2 Niall Quinn mentions and 2 Sunderland mentions into this conversation. The only real debate here, the side bet is who's going to come out on top there, Sunderland or Quinn, and remains to be seen. So who comes out on top between Liverpool and Man City this season, Jonathan, is the burning question.
I mean, I think probably City, but maybe 55-45. And underlying all these discussions is City are much, much richer. And that's important, not just in the players they can afford and the facilities, but they've been able to afford Guardiola, who's one of the greatest coaches of all time, as Klopp is. But it's an incredible achievement of Liverpool just to keep this close. With they spent something like £400 million less in transfer fees net over the last 6 seasons. So to just to stay on their coattails and to be a regular challenger and to have, in terms of head-to-head record between Klopp and Guardiola, Klopp's is better, which nobody else can say over any period of time. So, I'd be surprised if City ran away with it. And I think there's a potential that the World Cup could blow City up and the Holland situation could blow City up. But I think they are still just about favourites.
Yeah, okay. I think that is the general sense. All right. I mean, it is going to be fascinating to see what a World Cup in the middle of a season does. In some ways, it should have been the first question I asked you because it's just such an unprecedented aspect to this season. And what are your overarching thoughts on it? Will it just be a case of recovery and fitness, or I guess emotion comes into the whole thing as well, and who goes deep in a World Cup and who doesn't, and who wins and who has heartbreak, and all of these intangibles and injuries will happen, and it's hard to know what bearing it's going to have, I think, until we see the bearing that it has. It'll be quite specific and unpredictable, I think, the impact that the World Cup has.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it's not just as coming in the middle of a season. It's that we've never had a major tournament coming. I think it's 8 days between the final Premier League game and the first game of the World Cup. So I mean, that's going to have an impact on the World Cup as well. I mean, how can you prepare? So I think that first round of group games at the World Cup. I mean, actually, you saw that at the Cup of Nations. First round of group games at the Cup of Nations were pretty universally dire. There was barely any goals scored, and a couple of quite weird results. And I think you could see that at the World Cup. And then equally coming back, the World Cup final is what is it, December the 19th, a week before Christmas.
Yeah.
And we're back playing on Boxing Day. And so those Christmas fixtures are already a sort of grueling test. I know that you haven't got that game between Boxing Day and New Year, but still, I think those Boxing Day fixtures, there could be some very weird stuff happens there. Or it may be that every manager just shuts things down and you get a series of really boring games.
Remains to be seen. We're going to take a very short ad break. Jonathan Wilson is staying with us. So they're the top two, best of the rest, I suppose, up for discussion next. In just one moment, back with Jonathan in a second.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, get all the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, watch over 400 games this season from the Premier League, WSL, Scottish Premiership and EFL. Live on Sky Sports.
You're welcome back. We're looking ahead to the Premier League, which gets underway on Friday. Jonathan Wilson, journalist and author, is with us. His new book, Two Brothers, charts the lives of Jack and Bobby Charlton. It's available now. We'll be chatting to him about it on the show in due course. But in the meantime, we are looking ahead to the Premier League season. We've talked Man City and Liverpool in the main for obvious reasons. And then, of course, there are the rest. Jonathan trying to close the gap. To what extent do you anticipate the rest, whoever may be front of that pecking order, I don't know. But to what extent do you think they are closing the gap or prepared to close the gap on Liverpool and City this season?
Well, I think Chelsea probably are further away than they were last season. I think the other three of the top six are probably slightly closer. I think the gap is still pretty profound. I'd be amazed if anybody. I think would it be amazed? No, I think it would be a pretty big surprise if anybody other than City or Liverpool won the title.
Yeah.
Chelsea. I think last season perhaps we overestimated them at the start of the season, that we sort of got suckered into thinking Lukaku was the solution to their goal scoring problems. But we'd seen them have a very, very good run in the Champions League.
And there was that day against Arsenal where he bullied them, and Sky were ebullient in their praise of Lukaku, and he really did look like a changed man, ready to come back and take over the league.
Yeah, then in retrospect you think, but then Ivan Toney bullied Arsenal as well. Bullying Arsenal is quite easy to do if you're a big centre forward. Maybe less so towards the end of the season. Yes. But then, I guess it's a result of sanctions, but Chelsea don't look in a strong position now as they did last season. Obviously, Lukaku's gone. I don't think that forward line is anywhere near as good as we thought it was. Ziyech hasn't really worked out. He plays and fits and starts. Havertz is fine, but hasn't really kicked on. Werner still doesn't score goals, and clearly Chelsea are trying to offload him. Because these ongoing rumours, the stories were there again today that Bowley's very keen to get Ronaldo in, and Tuchel's saying no. I think Ronaldo arriving there would be an absolute disaster for Chelsea, but I can also see why Bowley, as somebody who perhaps doesn't quite understand football, thinks, well, he'd be brilliant from a marketing point of view. He's one of the best handful of players ever. Why would we not want him? Sorry, go on.
I was just saying, I can just imagine Tuchel in the drive home from work having to have these conversations with Bowley about why Ronaldo would be a bad idea. And look, Penny, you'd pay a lot of money to eavesdrop on him talking to friends about the situation. He did publicly, Tuchel, send a very cautious note about this season. And, Sterling and Koulibaly aside said, we need more quality, we need more players to really challenge. I was going to say to you that ordinarily, if Tuchel were struggling by Christmas, well, I know what would happen under Abramovich, and it would be thank you, Thomas, and we'll see you again down the line. How trigger happy do we think Chelsea are going to be with their managers is an interesting question.
The truth is we don't know, but it would be it'd be a height of folly to put him under any pressure, because the point is, under Abramovich, they wouldn't only have made the signings they made. Marina Granovskaya was very, very good at getting transfers over the line. Bowley, having seen her leave, seen Petr Cech leave, is ended up having to be the sporting director, and he's a man with no experience in football. And to be honest, Chelsea keep on getting gazumped by Barcelona, who have no money. So, I think any sporting director, no matter how experienced, would be sort of sitting there scratching their head thinking, how can this club that's 1.3 billion euros in debt that can't register players, how do they keep spending more than us? It doesn't make any sense. So it's a bit of misfortune, I think, a bit of naivety on Bowley's part, and partly just circumstances. But the fact that Chelsea, I mean, would they have lost Rudiger had they not had the sanction, had they been able to offer him the contract? Possibly, but possibly not. Christensen probably would have gone Aspilicueta, may have stayed an extra year, may still end up staying an extra year because he hasn't signed anything with Barcelona yet. But that's left them very, very short at the back. Koulibaly fills one of those holes, but I think they really could do with another centre back. And then they've got this problem in midfield that Jorginho and Kante both got 1 year left in the contracts now, both the wrong side of 30. You probably want to move on at least one of them. And yet there doesn't seem to be any movement to do that. And unless they do somehow hijack Manchester United's deal for Frankie de Jong, and he can be persuaded to leave Barcelona and can sort out his deferred wages. But there doesn't seem to be any effort to sign another holding midfielder. It looks like they might be able to get Cucurella, which I guess is good for the squad depth because he puts pressure on Chilwell, can cover for Reece James on the right as well. But I still think the 2 or 3 pretty major players short of a proper title challenge.
Spurs and Arsenal we'll come back to in a second. They're making steady progress, it would seem, over the summer. Manchester United are still very unresolved. We have a new manager in the league. We have the De Jong situation very much unresolved. We have the Ronaldo situation very much unresolved. They are all big question marks going into this season. So Ten Hag, De Jong, Ronaldo, those 3 will go a long way towards deciding the next couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how Ronaldo can possibly play for them again. I mean, that would be such an admission of defeat from the club. I know Ten Hag keeps saying, "Oh no, I'm happy to work with him," but surely that's just being diplomatic. I mean, there's no way Ronaldo fits in a Ten Hag system, and we've seen everything Ten Hag has done this summer has been very, very strict. He's made them get rid of their personal chefs. He's reinstituted fines for being late for training. It's very much he's the boss. And I think Rangnick maybe was just too nice for that role, and so never got anywhere near implementing his vision of football. That vision is not a dissimilar vision to Ten Hag's, but I think Ten Hag's got that steel to really implement it. And then for Ronaldo to wander into that, and the stories you hear from last season of Ronaldo in training and sort of objecting to pressing drills and saying, "Oh no, training has to be fun." And sort of undermining, Rangnick and also Harry Maguire, which maybe is one of the reasons Maguire had such a poor season last season. Yeah, I just don't know why you'd want him anywhere near the dressing room. So, I think at some point some deal will be done so that he can leave, whether that's to go to the US or to Sporting or to wherever.
And as a brief tangent, the undermining of Maguire, what shape did that take?
Well, he was desperate for captaincy. Yeah. And the captaincy remained with Maguire, but Ronaldo kept agitating for it. So I think that's furthered the sense of insecurity Maguire felt. I think Maguire. I think it's easy to look at Maguire and think, "Oh, he's a big bloke with a massive head. He's from Yorkshire. He must be tough." I think he's a little bit more vulnerable than perhaps we realise. And you remember that period immediately after the court case in Greece, which that appeal still hasn't been resolved. That's still all dragging on. Yeah. But that period immediately after the court case, his form was disastrous and I think he is somebody who's very affected by that. And I think the thing that really the hammer blow for him last season was he had that ankle injury, was rushed back for that away game at Leicester, and United had just got back into the game, and De Gea gave him a slightly short pass, and because of the ankle, he couldn't push off to react to it. Yes. The ball got nicked off him. Leicester then go on to win 4-2, and everybody sort of blaming Maguire. And it's sort of, well, yeah, but if he hadn't been rushed back, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. And I think that was where his form really collapsed. So, I think there's every reason to think Maguire will be better this season. I think the fact they've got the 3 centre-backs means they can play with a back 3. But they haven't got a right-back either. They desperately need a new right-back. And there doesn't seem to be any movement on that. And they've obviously pinned all the hopes on De Jong in the centre midfield. That's drag. Again, it's all the non-coach stuff at the club seems to go wrong perpetually. The fact that they haven't haven't managed to get that. So I know it's difficult because his deferred wages are a situation that is pretty unusual. But at some point, you've got to cut your losses and say, look, sort this out in a week. Say to Barcelona, you've got a week to sort this out. And if you haven't, we're moving on. And, if you're a club of any kind of stature, if you're Liverpool, who I think have done their transfer business impeccably, you'll have a second choice like this. You'll know who your backup option is. And you can already see what's going to happen, which is that deal doesn't get done. He ends up going, say, to Chelsea, and he clearly, I think, would favour a move to London over Manchester. And United end up sort of a week before the transfer deadline scrabbling around and end up signing Yuri Tielemans from Leicester for too much money because Leicester somehow have decided to just give up this summer.
That all feels entirely likely and in keeping with much of the last decade. So, say Ronaldo, and by the way, what a gracious teammate to really help out Harry Maguire when he's booed by the national team in the national stadium, or the national team fans in the stadium. I mean, what a charming way to dig a friend out there. Say Ronaldo does go, again, which looks inevitable given everything Ten Hag has done in his career. United have no one up front that they can rely on.
Yeah, well, that's the other position where they're desperately short. That, there's obviously the Mason Greenwood situation, which you can't really blame the club for, but they've had a year to sort that out. Rashford's form last season was dreadful. You hope that he'll return, but who knows? All of Cavani's injury problems last season, so you end up relying on Anthony Martial, which, he has not been a consistent performer at all. He had a decent pre-season, but you wouldn't want him to be a main centre forward going into the new season. I guess you hope Jadon Sancho, playing in a system more akin to that at Dortmund, where he did thrive, that he'll feel more comfortable than he did under a slightly looser system last season, and he maybe can kick on. But they don't have an obvious central attacking presence.
So really, all hope around Manchester United doing something this year is that Ten Hag is getting more from the sum of the parts than has been the case over the last number of years. What is your read on Ten Hag? Have you been impressed with what you saw from him at Ajax? How translatable is that? And beyond the I'm in charge, here are the rules, which are always leaked to the papers, what have you made of United in pre-season?
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult to tell because he did brilliantly at Ajax, but that's the Eredivisie. Can you do it anywhere else? And it's not even like he's gone to Germany or Belgium or anywhere else to sort of get more experience. And the situation in the Dutch league is clear that Ajax are one of, well, at the minute, two outstanding teams. It's a very different world to the world of English football. I think everything you've seen of him this summer, he's done the right things. He's imposed himself in a way that Rangnick didn't. I think he probably needed to do that. I think there was a sense that squad had been a bit too indulged and probably needs the iron fist. But that's the kind of thing that in 2 weeks can look very different. Who is this Martinet who doesn't have a clue? Who's ostracised all his players.
He won't let us have our chefs, Jonathan. We can't even have our chefs. Do you know what I mean? They'll be the exact leaked by players to media in 2 weeks when they lose their first two games.
That's something that I'd love to know more of the logic behind that. I assume it's almost a symbolic thing of I'm in charge, and you can't have multiple different nutritionists. But I would have thought individual players require individual nutrition plans, and I would have thought the more sensible thing is for the clubs to work with the private chefs, because the players can't be eating every meal at the club, surely.
Well, I got the impression it's like Meals on Wheels. We're preparing your meals and they're coming to your house.
But
I don't know. This is a group where they still, in 2013, remember the shock of Moisey cancelling the oven chips,
but also the food you get delivered, we've all had takeaway, and we all know that certain foodstuffs lend themselves to takeaways, and anything you want crispy doesn't. So it's limiting what they can eat. I don't know. Maybe it is just sort of centralising the power and saying, look, I am your one true God, obey me. And you can't have this man cooking your pre-match pasta. It has to be us. But I would have thought there was a sort of compromise position there. But if it works, everybody will go, what a genius he's been. If it fails, everybody will say, how ludicrous to ban the players doing that.
Yeah, for sure. So who knows where Manchester United fall. Spurs and Arsenal have reasons to feel excited about a new season. The progress has been steady under both Conte and Arteta. Arsenal are the highest spenders this summer. Zinchenko, Jesus, Fabio Vieira amongst their signings. And then Conte, it really does seem, is being backed to some degree or other. I'm sure Spurs fans will argue they could spend more money, but they have given him money to spend. And his January signings, I mean, if he repeats the trick with these summer signings, then they will be a force.
Oh yeah, I mean they've brought in 6 players on permanent deals, plus Longley on loan. They seem to have been very targeted in who they've gone after. So yeah, Richarlison, whose pressing stats last season were incredible. Plus, was it 10 goals and 5 assists in a poor Everton team? So yeah, he's clearly a very high class player who should fit the Conte system, and that relieves the pressure on Kane and Son and Kulusevski to a lesser extent, because he can play across that front three. So yeah, and bringing in 2 different options at wing back, I think that's an area where there's a huge level of attrition. So they've now got 6 wing backs in the squad, which is probably too many. But given how much effort they have to put in, I think that's, you'd probably rather have more there than less. They haven't really had a commanding midfielder for quite a while. So bringing in Bissouma, you look at Bissouma and Bentancur and you think, yeah, that's a really good pairing. Both of them pretty tough. Both of them can put their foot in. Both of them good passes of the ball. I mean, I've seen a lot of Tottenham fans on social media seem pretty frustrated that Spurs haven't made any effort to get James Maddison in, given that Leicester seems to want to sell him. But to be honest, I don't really see where he fits in that team. If you're playing a 3-4-3, then your 2 central midfielders need to be real grafters who ideally can also pass, which is what they've got in Bissouma and Bentancur. Whereas Maddison, I guess, would end up probably stuck out on the left, which I'm not sure that's necessarily the best place for him. And you've got Son and Richarlison can play there anyway. So I think they've been pretty smart in who they've gone after. Even bringing in Fraser Forster as a backup keeper, I think there's been times when Lloris has looked slightly suspect. I think it's not a bad thing at all to have an experienced alternative. I mean, Forster's 34 now. Yeah. But after a bit of a lull, played pretty well at times for Southampton last season. So I think all of that makes sense.
Arsenal did lose 2 games late on last year to hand over 4th spot to Spurs. They still did finish 11 points ahead of Manchester United, who were in 6th. I mentioned the signings that they've made. So is your sense, Chelsea concerns, which we touched on, but Spurs and Arsenal, and really it will be top 4 from those 5?
Well, no, I'd say that top 6 breaks into three bands. So I'd say the City and Liverpool. Yeah. I'd say there's Chelsea and Tottenham. There's Arsenal and Manchester United. Of course, anybody can step up or step down from one band to the next. But I could just about imagine a world in which Chelsea or Tottenham win the league this season. I mean, I think it'd be a surprise, but I can imagine how it could happen. Yeah. I'd be absolutely stunned if Arsenal and Manchester United were to do that. So I think that there are still the 3 bands. And I think the thing with Arsenal, I mean...
And you have Arsenal very much more in the Manchester United band than keeping pace with Spurs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that squad-wise are probably better than Manchester United. I think they should be thinking 5th is a sort of... is their par, whereas United's probably 6th is their par. Yeah. And of course, they could finish 4th. Of course they could. But I think that the thing with Arsenal last season was they were so weirdly moody that they had, I think, 4 separate runs where they won 1 of 4 or 5 games. And when they get in these little slumps, they seem to find it quite difficult to get out. And then I think they had 4 runs as well where they won 4 or more games in a row. Now, partly has to do with the calendar, partly to do with injuries. I think they still have that problem that particularly away against good teams, they tend not to get results. So I think in the 10 games against the other members of the top 6 last season, they won 3 and lost 7. Now that's not a million miles from being fine. Yeah, you only have to win 5, and you think, well, that's a brilliant record against the top 6. But I think they are a team that when they get down on themselves, they can be very beatable. And maybe that's partly to do with the youth of the side as well. But I think the issue there is almost mentality more than anything else. And that's where I think bringing in the likes of Jesus and Zinchenko, who've got experience of being in title races and being in quite grueling campaigns where you have to keep producing, that should be beneficial to them. I think Zinchenko especially is a fascinating signing because I think he ended up being slightly marginalised at City. That when he did play, tended to be at left back, but we've seen him for Ukraine playing either back of midfield and left of midfield. And I think there is a lot of creativity there that maybe the way City played didn't quite tap into.
Jonathan, just a very last one then. You could do 20 minutes, half an hour on Newcastle all on their own. Just one question on Newcastle, because this is going to be a very intriguing season in many ways. So Live Golf is going splendidly well. They're throwing hundreds of millions at various players. Cam Smith set to sign and Matsuyama set to sign. Not as many players signing for Newcastle. What's your read on what's going on at Newcastle this summer?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I thought they signed very sensibly in January. I thought they'd have made a lot more signings now. I mean, they brought in Nick Pope, so probably an improvement on what they've had in goal, but I don't think that was ever a sort of urgent. I don't think there's any urgent need to bring in another keeper. They firmed up the Matt Targett's loan signing. Sven Botman, I think, is a decent signing. But I think when that takeover happened, if you'd said to Newcastle fans, next summer, the biggest name you'll bring in, the most exciting player you'll bring in is Sven Botman, I think they'd have been pretty disappointed in that. It's obviously an improvement on what was there before, on what Mike Ashley would have brought in. And I think they'll probably sign 2 or 3 more before the end of the window, but it's not the mega riches that we expected. Now, are they keeping their powder dry? Are they waiting to see how the season goes and looking to buy in January again? Are they looking to get cheaper deals near the end of the window when clubs are keener to sell? Have the owners decided, no, actually the future is golf and we want to give all our money to Dustin Johnson rather than to Neymar or whoever? I don't know. But yeah, it's been a strangely quiet summer for Newcastle. And I think that first month of the season, one of the really intriguing games is that game. I think it's the last Sunday in August when Newcastle play City, and it'd be fascinating to see who Newcastle have in by then and how competitive they are against City in that game.
For sure. Listen, it all begins again. It's going to be such an interesting season. Not a single Niall Quinn or Sunderland reference in part 2 of that conversation.
I reined myself in. I became very self-conscious about it.
No, it was a worthy draw. 2 Brothers, the life and times of Bobby and Jackie Charlton, which we'll be chatting to you about very shortly, is available certainly to pre-order now. What's the actual release date, or does it vary country to country? You're global, I presume, at this stage.
The official release date is August 11th.
Right.
I mean, they always seem to be available slightly before that. And I honestly don't know what the difference between UK and Ireland is, in terms of when it's released. I would assume it's the same because when you sell it as UK and Ireland rights. It's looking at their lives, their relationship, but also trying to place them in a social and political context, which I think is because they I think they're weirdly underappreciated in England.
Right.
That there's only ever been 2 pairs of brothers have won the World Cup together. So the Walters for West Germany in 1954 and them, and the whole thing of their relationship with the mother, I think, is fascinating. The coming from that very tight knit mining community in Ashington, and how that shaped them, and both of them had a slightly troublesome relationship with home. I mean, Jack far less, but definitely early on he felt very, very uneasy about the prospect of going away and possibly having to come back as a failure. And Bobby barely went back for the last sort of 20 or 30 years of his life. And that in a sense is the tragedy of Northeast England, that so many of us are exiles because economic life is dwindling there.
Sold. Well, listen, I'm really looking forward to reading it and chatting to you about it in due course. But for the time being, Jonathan Wilson, much appreciated. Great to have you on. Enjoy the Premier League season ahead, Jonathan. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, get all the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.